people. Babies in black, and I'm feeling blue.
No.
You should really collect all the songs about black. What can I do, babies in black? Right, okay, you ready to go?
Yes.
Are you on camera?
Yes, I am.
Okay, good.
So the topic of my review critique presentation is the EU's approach to improve financial regulation. It was written by Ian Beck, and he's a research professional fellow at London School of Economics. So he is basically researching on the sake of government on the topic of financial regulation, how it happened, what caused the problems, what should be done, and so on. So talking about 2008 financial crisis, especially about EU, we have to see it in 4 stages.
Wait, what's this?
Yeah, the first stage is, I would like to say, firefighting, and that is how he put it. So firefighting is basically making sure that any problem you encounter right now, you neutralize it, but on the level of just nation. If Germany is having a problem, German government is solving it. If France is having a problem, France is solving it. So the example would be blanket guarantee. So the term is a financial term that means that you say to your depositors that your deposits are safe. Ireland and United Kingdom did that. Well, that turned out to be a very big problem. Equity injection, that's just making sure that you have enough money in your central bank liquidity. You just make sure your bank has enough money. Shotgun marriage. There is one example of shotgun marriage. It was in England. There was a relatively sound company and a relatively not good performing company. And they just had to merge so that the new firm would be still be unstable, but not unstable enough to not control it. So then we have nationalization and absorption of financial intermediaries. We know Spanish bank Santander, right? And Fortis and Hypo Bank, they all had to be either nationalized or rescued, recapitalized, restructured among around over the Europe. So that is just banks that were central banks that were large performing financial institutions, which was very hard. Let's put it up there. Now phase 2. The phase 2 would be, now they tried everything they could from the national level. Now they are being European wise, and they are trying to do a country level wide stabilization. So what they did was they tried to shore up bank solvency. That would mean they made sure that bank was able to perform well. They had enough cash on it. They have enough asset. And now coordinated fiscal recovery package. What that would mean is that European Commission, European Council, they made sure that European Central Bank itself, they made sure that they will hand over some fiscal recovery packages. And with that packages, you can actually get out of the situation. They provided some guarantee, they provided some liquidity. They did was pumping the cash where cash was low. They did what it took to make sure that they were getting good with the situation. The third stage. And the third stage is recovery consolidation. So there was this temporary phase within the crisis that we thought it was over. So we made sure that now we don't want to have such situation again. So we have some ideas like hedge funds, private equities, tax havens. So hedge fund would mean just partnership of private owners in which there are multiple owners. They invest money. There is a general manager. He capitalizes it. He manages it. And there is private equity. There is tax haven. Tax haven is an area in which tax is substantially low, so that we can do work. We can do our finance. And we made sure that capital adequacy in large span would be there. So the first 3 were done by Germany and France, and the other ones went down there. So remuneration, bonus, and incentives had to be controlled. In Netherlands, in Greece, the thing was that they retired, so government was spending extremely more. So that is why they had to cut their spending, and they had to now make sure that they are controlling it. Now came the really worst part, which would be sovereign debt crisis. Started with Greece. So in October 2008, government was changed in Greece. Government came, it saw what was wrong with the files. When it was going to the books, so what it found was nothing was going good actually. The Greece was actually in too much debt, and the premium rose and rose. So Greece has to do something. It tried to sell its government bond, but the problem is no one bought it because the bond was too risky. And due to lack of buyer, it couldn't even sell it, so it had to throw in the towel and it had to accept a complex rescue package from IMF and EU. It was a phase one. It might have neutralized a little bit, but the condition became even worse. Then it had to take more packages as July 2011 and October 2011. That's just 3 months. They just went really bad condition, leading to a 74% haircut agreement. That means that they had to cut their spending by 74%, government spending, so Greece couldn't actually continue anymore. And now similar packages were handed to Ireland and Portugal because they themselves were a problem. They were also an actor in this crisis. So here we have the timeline, which might overlap, which does not match because some things are happening simultaneously. We look at what caused the crisis. So the main cause of crisis was that the world was changing too quickly with the innovation, with the euro being formed and with euro not actually being properly managed. There was policy, monetary policy, which deals with how much money is to be supplied, what is the interest rate, and that is actually really loose. That was loose in Europe. We always thought that if something is really large, if market is really large, then it can actually regulate itself. Too big to fail was what we thought. But now that was the really big problem. And there is failings of corporate governance. Now I like to put a point here that once you take an action, it takes some time to have a consequence. And if you're a government, you make sure good comes in yours and bad comes in your next. So corporate governance, what they did was they saw their term and they pushed their bad things, bad conclusions to the next term. So that was a failing of corporate governance. And oversighting by senior management, that would mean that they did not even see the thing. Someone suggested, there were experts, there were professors suggesting that something is going to be really wrong with Europe. Even in US, there were always suggestions, but management never saw it that way. And they couldn't recognize it, and they were unable to solve it once the problem became large enough. Now we see, after the crisis, European countries came together, and here's the picture on which they decided the new framework of Europe should be. So the top half would be ECB Council, which is composed of central bankers. The middle part, they are chairs of banking authorities and such other things. So the top part is constituting ESRB, European System Risk Board. So what they basically did was make sure that such a problem would never happen in national level. So their job was to check that Germany would never fail, England would never fail, France would never fail. In the bottom half, that was microprudential supervision. That was basically their motto. And what this is means that they will make sure that they will control individual banks, individual assets. They'll make sure they will install a system in which a bank can fail. They will allow a bank to fail without having to fail the whole system. So this was basically their work. And there are some, the bottom half actually conducted a stress test. When the new government, new architecture was formed, they did a stress test. So basically they checked each and every bank. So first, they checked in 2010 summer, they checked the bank on the basis of they just went through the books, see what was wrong with the books. And they saw 5 banks had to be recapitalized. And in the next year, the newly formed EBA took the charge, and it did an adverse but plausible scenario. A test was such that what would happen if a government had its GDP to fall down by 4%. And the criteria was that the ratio had to be, capital ratio had to be more than 5%. And in that test, there was 8 out of 90 banks in 21 countries could not pass the test. And the 16 of them were really critical because their threshold, their level was just between 5 and 6%. They tried to now maximize the capital ratio. And then, now even that test was not good enough because it lacked one most important thing. And the thing was, what would happen if the banks that Greece had taken its loan to was itself at risk? So it did not take that into factor. Now we see, after we see the banks, now we have to do something with it, the faulty banks. And this is a chart which is put in the paper. And this shows that there are three options. Either we make it bankrupt, either we sell its assets, either we make it as going concern, we just do stuff. Now I would like to focus your attention here. It asks a permission to sell the private assets of bank, if necessary. And that was a little bit harsh on people. They didn't really like it because it was their assets going down. It was so, and then the other problem came, which was even more bigger. What would happen if the condition was to arise that there were more than one country is involved? Like there was no EU, there was EU, there is EU, which cannot take decision on the national level. It can just take within a nation, but not the whole Europe level. So what would happen? So that was the problem. And we also tried some economic changes, we tried some policy changes, and some of the policy changes were we made sure that our fiscal position would have a debt and current deficit criteria. Now, fiscal policy is where we see government spending. What the debt criteria is, we see how much debt we are in, how much we are supposed to pay to some other nation, so that when we see we are spending on our government, we make sure that we have to pay them a lot. And there's current deficit criteria, that meaning we are on debt, we are on loss, we have to make sure we have to decrease this. And then we have to see, there needed to be a system which can see such problems like asset bubbles and rigidities on supply side that needed to be seen on time. And there is a European budget. So what this budget really says is, in 1 year, we publish 2 budgets. In one budget, what we do is, whole Euro-wide, we make it the same. We do it for the Europe. We do it for the sake of Europe, for the sake of strengthening of Europe. And the second budget, we do it for our nation. And in that way, EU would not control its member states that much, and we will still get out of the problems. And then we asked for a better fiscal policy. If an ECB, EU, EC, they all say that if you don't want to give me the control, just make sure that you will do on your own. And they also focused on permanent crisis management mechanism. They had to work on it. No one had put it better, and no one actually knew, so they had to find it for themselves. Now lies challenges and what is to be done for the next stage. And the first challenge would be to implement whatever we just said. All the legislations and policies. The thing is, we just said it, but that's not going to happen unless we implement it, and we have to force government to implement it. And we need European level macroprudential supervision. The macro level supervision, that would mean we need to give an institution among the Europe a priority or a right to meddle with the affairs, no matter who they are. As long as they are doing bad, they are trying to dictate it, but in a good way. And then there is need to reform the EU directive. So they are doing securities markets and products. They had to keep it in mind that the securities, which basically fell in prices, they had to make sure that we had to reform the security. And then the next thing would be the environment which Europe has to work with, different interests, different kind of environment. So complexity, political instability, we have to go through with different systems, and that we had to do something with that. So the paper is vague on what to do it, but it says we need to do it. So now can no longer be tolerated. It is actually a threat, because if you want to save yourself and if you want me to save you, then make sure that do the things that I want you to do. And what they say, if the rules you agreed on, there are rules you have agreed on, then you make sure that you implement those rules. Now the Europe Commission, Central Bank has said that 30% of EU GDP had been promised, and they used just 13%. So it promised to utilize even more, invest in some sectors. Now there is a problem with the title says accommodating different interests. So different interests means competing interest preferences, like there is Eastern Europe development, there is United Kingdom with its own autonomy, there is Germany and France, the strongest one, and there are the others, which are not very stable. So we had to, and there were some communist intended economies, some were, so we had to accommodate in different situations. But the problem that happened was we agreed on the idea. We agreed that we had to make a better Europe. We agreed that we have to have an institution. But when going through the books, when saying what to do, we didn't know what to do because we could not agree. No one could have agreed on the same idea, same material, because everyone wanted to implement their own. And well, you know a fact that even if a better thing comes, but if someone else suggests it, you are against it because you were not the one who suggested it. Yeah, that happened in Europe. And I'd like to call this an EFC tussle, but it's a fight between England, France, and Germany. The capital of England, London, France, Paris, and financial capital of Germany, Frankfurt. They were trying to make sure that they are the one who would be the European financial capital. These all three states, these all three cities, which I said, they have substantial power among Europe. But they wanted to make sure that previously it was London, now since Brexit, it's Frankfurt. And well, we say no, the polarization is now in Frankfurt. It's not the capital, we can say that it's Frankfurt. And the rivalry made sure that we cannot actually change. Now France has a habit of, this is an allegation, not my choice, and this was a paper allegation. France has a habit of freewheeling. It just tries to make things good and doesn't do much actually. It just makes others work. It was alleged, so that was the problem as well. And what London argued was that if such regulation were to be placed, then there would be a problem because London would be not productive at all. The productivity would fall. And there would be a gap in the market. And since London has limited amount of investors, Europe would fill that gap. So it was actually worried. And now there was a financial transaction tax. In this tax, there were opinions, there were polarization of opinions, in which France and Germany were at the favor of the tax, and United Kingdom was not. So what financial transaction tax really means is that we pay a certain amount of tax per transaction. So for favor, what they said was, well, Europe is not being funded that much. If we do a financial transaction tax, we can create funds for EU, we can extract revenues, and we can tax the undertaxed, because those who perform this financial transactions, they are the ones who are richer. And now, for the anti, they say, well, it's not a well-convinced tax. We don't really know what it means. And it has a really minor economic significance. 0.25% to 0.5% of EU GDP change would mean nothing. So what are we trying to do? Why are we even implementing this? And they say that there are free rider nations. That means some nations who are poor, they wouldn't even pay this. And there are political issues. Even in richer countries, if we say we have to pay, then the politicians have to make sure that, how to answer this to the people. And they could not. And the role of ECB comes here. And the concept of ECB is that since it already monitors and analyzes financial stability, it should also control the whole Europe, the macroprudential level of Europe. Information access, which central bank hold to its utmost level, they did not want to give it to ECB. And the question which really came was, should ECB just focus on what it was made for, just for price stability, just for euro stability? Should it be given fiscal governing power as well? Meaning, should it be allowed to dictate government how much they are allowed to spend? Now, not just in euro area, or should they be given it in Europe? So what's the problem in that? Those who are not in euro area, they have conflict of interest now, because the UK, even UK would be uncomfortable, because now they're having to accommodate with whatever ECB says, and such countries does not like it. And now the problem is there being a Europe and there being a euro area. So only 17 out of 27 member states that then were in euro area, only they were the one bigger similarities. So we had problem having to exclude 10 people out of whatever we suggested. So now disputes became, in Germany, Axel Webb and Jürgen Stark resigned. They were prominent politicians. So Axel Webb was about to, I wouldn't know that actually, it's again in papers. So what it says is, he was actually going to be an ECB successor after Jean-Claude Trichet. And then Germany resigned because Germany didn't want to push ECB. But France, on the other hand, actually did. It's made sure that it asked ECB, if you are the one who is giving money when they are in problem, then make sure that you act decisively. And then France actually held ECB firm. Even then, there is much to do in Europe. So the first thing was when Greece fell, when Ireland fell, when Portugal fell, when Spain seeked resources, support, when Cyprus wanted help, then we found out that financial stability and fiscal policy were really interconnected. But we have to connect them as well, even in euro level. And then next, we saw that after the 74% haircut of Greek bondholders, we found out that after the next transaction, if something goes wrong, even the private bondholders would have to take the blame, would have to take the damage. Now the concept is how to solve it. And as the paper puts, we solve the creation of Eurobond backed by whole euro area. And that will be much better than the average of bond of individual euro states. So if everyone focuses on single bond instead of everyone focusing on just their bond, it would make sure that euro bond would be extremely sound. But the problem was that what would happen later, the coupon rate would go high, payment liability would actually be transferred to the most credit-worthy nation. Those as the English paper puts it, it's just Germany, because only it is able to pay the bond. And what it also says is whoever is doing good, whoever is disciplined enough, they have to pay the tax. So that's actually opposite of the logic. And whoever are the indisciplined one, whoever are not performing good, they would be a free riders. And after the hurdles, there was another hurdle. Say there is no European taxpayer, we just pay to our government. So who's going to redeem the Eurobond when the time goes bad? No idea. The solution was share liability. Yes, solution, but again, solution came with a problem. And the problem was member state would not pay only their shares, but for sometimes they would pay the whole liability if they are the only one doing so. Even in Germany, rich states like Bavaria and Hessen has to cover for low and poor states like Mecklenburg-Vorpommern and the northern state. So at that times, we have to share our burden. And this idea was not really liked in Europe. Now the challenges lie in creating a crisis resilient bond. We have to find a bond that will not be prone to crisis, that will be stable, and that is what basically we have to do, which actually ends my presentation and the paper. Any questions?
Any questions? Oh my God, only about 3 million. Yeah, but you should only really ask them now, what can you remember? But I'll ask you one by one to stand up and repeat what you just said. Any questions? Loads of questions.
Actually, this was a seminar topic. I would give it
Yeah, but
3-4 hours, not just 15 minutes.
I'm glad you did it. I'm glad you did it. If you wanted to, you have to actually ask permission. But what did you understand then?
Like, I understand about something, and it's civilizations, but I have a question.
Sure.
Right, that's the end.
What causes the crisis that you told, like monetary policies, financial innovations?
Oh, what causes the crisis? You have to go really
How many slides are there?
It's actually 10 slides just being animated.
All right, 10 slides, 76.
So now we have a.
Right.
Look, what happened was explained here. We have a financial innovation. We had much of change. Our monetary policy was constant. Our fiscal policy was deregulated every time. So that was the problem. The other problem was we were unable to see the problem. That was the problem. Even in US, credit rating agencies were rating however they wanted. For money or so, it was just their rating. So whatever happened was they did not regulate Europe properly. So that was why the crisis happened. And in Greece and in Ireland, the thing was they were lending money from banks and they were unable to pay. And there were problems. So houses were being built. In Ireland, there were bungalows being built, mansions being built, but for the money, there was no, when they had to pay, there was no money. So whole Europe went to crisis because the economy of Europe is intertwined. So Greek bank, they get money from Spanish bank, they get from French bank. I'm not saying the right thing, but you get the gist. Everyone borrows money from one to other. But in hard times, the borrowing literally stopped because they all knew it was hard times and they were unable to provide money to other nations, thinking that now they will have a problem maintaining their own country.
Okay, let's take it slow now. Okay, because you're all, in one way or another, you're all studying management and economics. And this slide here, what caused the crisis, which is what I wanted to remind you of. There are some things on this slide. For example, like the market can regulate itself, failings in corporate governance, oversight by senior management. Now you're all studying management and economics. So I don't know, what role does, for example, oversight? What is your role as a future manager? What's your role? What do managers do?
Managers,
What do they
like
do?
regulate the
Regulate.
companies and regulating
They
the
regulate.
they regulate it. Like they-
Find out how to regulate. And what do they actually do?
They just make the policies and
And they, look, if it says here, oversight by senior management.
oversighting means like
No, oversight. So the word is oversight.
Yeah.
Oversight. Right? It means.
means that they just might have ignored
Oh, right.
what
And
was coming up, or they just thought, yeah, it's coming up, it will be like solved, and they didn't care about it.
Okay, right. So I mean, that's what I'm asking you. Is that what you're taught? Is that the management science that you're taught? You sort of say, oh yeah, we're not interested in that, and oh, that will go away, like bad weather. Is that what you're taught? You think not? Yeah, or you don't need to pay attention to other things, or you don't need to pay attention to all things. Aren't you taught that you're supposed to control, not regulate, but aren't you supposed to keep trying to control everything? Because what you're suggesting, Bashir, because of your topic and because of the paper, I hope that your critique wasn't as long as your talk. Because if it was,
It was actually.
well, it must have then broken all the rules. But the point is, this obviously it was going on simultaneously in many countries, and of course the actual crisis was triggered in the United States, not in Europe.
Well,
It was obviously because Europe does not run the international financial market. It doesn't. It is slavish in its.
so there is a line in paper. Although the notion of financial crisis was made in USA,
They say
the actual trigger was in Ireland, with ECB controlled by pumping out a lot of money. So it was paper.
and it's just tiny in comparison to the volumes of.
I understand.
The volumes of oversight and the volumes of failings and the volumes of misbelief.
Yes.
And the volumes of et cetera, inadequate recognition in the United States. You just said yourself, in answer to Andy, that rating agencies were just rating things. You said that however they wanted.
Yes.
But that doesn't explain it, does it? Because these rating agencies still exist today. The
Yes.
same one. They were just how they wanted. They thought they were rating according to some plannable, manageable economic development. Because I think they're like you, they're trained as managers and economists. So they're not all idiots, pirates, robbers, monsters, drug addicts, drug addicts, they are, but they are not, they don't have these jobs generally because they haven't got any training. They actually think they know what they're doing. But given what we know of what they did, for example, like giving A+ rating to banks which were massively overstretched, that could never, by any conceivable measurement, ever be able to cover the debts that they were creating and financing. But they nevertheless gave these banks A+ ratings. How do you explain that? Because I think you have to explain it. I don't. I've got an answer.
There were some variables.
I'm interested in these people. You add your talk.
Oh,
I'm
okay,
interested in
sure.
these people. So how do you explain it? How do you explain the fact that A+, A++ ratings can be given to things which any idiot can say cannot work? So is there an explanation? And is it perhaps included in some of the things that you learned? Well, I see from Asha's reaction a skepticism towards my question, which is, I think, based on a lack of information. But anyway, I'd like to know an answer, because how do you explain it? How do you explain the fact that cities like Leipzig and Dortmund and Frankfurt sold their swimming pools, their tram lines, their waterworks, their electricity grids? They sold them to private investors in America and then re-leased them back because rating agencies were pushing out the value. So literally cities in Germany, all over Germany, in local governments, like here in Magdeburg, in the local parliaments, they voted to sell their own assets, their public assets, which were built with public taxes. And they re-leased them back from private investors because it was amazing that they were told and they believed that there was enormous amounts of money to be made by freeing yourself of running costs and just paying a leasing. Because on the private markets, these things were making for valuable assets. They were being traded in American stock markets. In other words, things like the waterworks in Böblingen, in southwestern Germany, were traded on the American stock market. They had to buy some of them back, for God's sake, after the crisis. How do you explain this? Doesn't it sound just like craziness? Yeah. What was the sense behind it? And the rating agencies that were behind all these problems, they carried on after the financial crisis, rating every country, pushing every country down on the basis, please, of what? I mean, Germany managed to escape. It wobbled from A++ down to something like B+ or something like that.
Private companies are like just they're like making money for the sake of their own.
Yeah, but governments decide what to invest. Well, the governments decide what policies to make on the basis of what a private company is doing in rating. That says, for example, if Ireland was rated as C minus or something like that, and so everybody just sold everything that they had from Ireland, and so it went even further down. Greece rating is, but I'm sure it's right at rock bottom. Yeah, and so how on the market, you know, why does Standard and Poor in New York and Chicago and wherever they are, how can they possibly pass a judgment on the economic well-being of the whole economy? Because this is just a private company working for profit. They earn their money by, I don't know, people like the televisions and the radio now who do their stock exchange reports pay rating agencies to establish ratings. And that's how they earn their money. It's like paying people to do nothing. So what's the explanation? Because this is the direction that's what you're learning. It's the market. The market regulates. I mean, Frucas says that everybody believed that the market would regulate everything. Right?
Yes.
And just another thing, I have to correct you. You suggested that too big to fail was an example of thinking the market would regulate itself. It's actually the idea that
System.
well, it means that these banks were, for example, just so big that we knew that if they failed, they would have to be socialized. So profits are privatized and losses are socialized. In other words, profits are made by private, losses are made by public people. So, for example, I don't know how many taxes you paid, probably not much, but I paid taxes. And so I paid for Standard & Poor, I paid for Lehman Brothers, I paid for the banks in Ireland, I paid for the banks in Iceland, I paid for the banks in England, I paid for the Commerzbank in Germany, which was nationalized. I paid for those. Not the people who ruined it. And just one other thing, you are learning this thing. What do you know about the bank laws in the United States? Like what banks are allowed to do? Have you learned about that yet?
No.
Well, I hope it's coming soon before it's too late. Because back in the 1920s and 30s, banks were allowed to do every kind of operation. You know, that was private investment, public investment, it was just small loans, it was just normal financing, all the operations of the bank. And then there were problems, and so there was a law passed, don't ask me, I forgot the name of it, you can Google it and find it out. It's really important, and it limited the scope of banks.
The Dodd-Frank law.
Could be. It limited the scope of banks. And that was in power until, I think, when was it, the 1990s. And then they allowed the bank once again to do anything. And then we had the financial crisis 2008-9, and after that, the discussion came up again to limit them again. And here in Europe, that's what happened basically.
Yes.
You had bad banks, good banks, and all the rest. In other words, everybody knew how these things work, but the governments themselves decided there was money in it. It was sexy. It was enormously sexy to push money into markets and push things up. It's vastly sexy to be into this kind of bubble economy. We have a whole history of bubbles, endless histories of bubbles, and they are the sexiest thing on earth. But all they lead to is this.
I like the fact that they got houses. I mean, they got into crisis, but look how many houses America has now.
Yeah, no, and look how many people have to sell their house.
Yes, I get that.
And
The house is still there. I mean,
yeah, but what kind of houses are there?
What?
They're rubbish.
yeah. What other way of, as the United States is playing the game, what other way of doing things rather than ruining the whole system and then creating it from the scratch? That's how I saw States. It was a bit, well, the topic was just in Europe. Couldn't go into United States, but what it was there was really mess.
Yeah. But I mean, I'm still asking you, I mean, why is it possible for managers apparently to not see these things?
I think they don't want to see them.
Why not? Why don't they want to see?
to make more profits. So
What kind of education then do these people have that they behave like
you know,
that? I mean,
I think self-interest is coming out for the sake of money only.
Maybe they corrupted.
I mean, that may be, but I mean, what do you mean by corrupted? It's a very simple way of explaining things. What do you mean?
I don't know.
You mean somebody's actually giving them money to do certain things?
Yeah.
Well, okay, that's, in America, that's.
Maybe it's not money, maybe it's something, some other kind of incentive.
Right, okay, incentives is another thing, and to describe all incentives as corruption is a bit of a dare prospect. But we're talking here about the United States, we're not talking about Albania. You said they didn't want to see it, but I mean,
perhaps some people. I heard that the rating for the USA is still very good. I think it's A double plus. Despite they are in huge debt.
Yeah.
So it doesn't make any sense. But since all the rating agencies are in the USA, they of course are going to rate their own country as high as possible.
I mean, you say, of course, but what, I mean, if they are truly doing the things that you learn, which is about science and economics and management, they shouldn't be doing things simply because they're American. They should be doing things because it makes sense, because it's correct. You know, like the calculations are correct. You don't give A++ to something which is B++. You think, and that's what I think. I don't mean you may be right. But so what's the logic then? Is there any?
Perhaps not, or they just don't want to accept that something they admire and something they think is good isn't as great as they think it is. That they
So
don't want to.
you're saying they are in a psychological dilemma.
Yeah.
It's very kind of you to think that these poor people are having a really hard time trying to work out, oh, what should I do? What should I do? It's really not as good as that. Yeah. Well, as you said, all of the rating agencies are American, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if you just read and listen to the news. One thing that you would have noticed is that for the last year, at least, if not longer, nobody here in this country and in many other countries talks about the rating agencies at all anymore. Because, which would suggest that if you spend 2 or 3 years only listening to the rating agencies and then 2 or 3 years never listening to them, it suggests that they can't really be that important in the end anyway. But during the crisis, and for some years after the crisis, they literally dominated daily politics in Europe. The politics of the German government. Every day. Because every time the Greek or the Italian or the Irish economy was pushed down another grade, then, for example, the German finance minister had to go in public and say something and do something. In other words, they were being driven, they were being pushed, they were being dragged by the rating agencies. Not by their own politics, not by the politics that you were talking about. They were being dragged by the pure, irrational interests of a group of people who nobody can even describe why they do what they do. Except it's a private company and they do it obviously to make money. But whole national government, that was the point of your talk. This problem between national interests, transnational interests, and perhaps global interests. And they're being pushed by private interest. Private, small private interest. So what's the summary?
Well,
What's the
summary of
you've
the
got
paper.
You've got very, no, the summary of this discussion, you've got very little time. What's your summary?
I don't know.
You got another question.
Like you told about the stress test, right? Like stress test is organized by who? Like,
European Banking Authority.
They have to sit down and work out various things. What can we do to test banks, whether they're, as Rupert said, if there was like 4% and whatever it is, drop in GDP, what would they do? How would they react? Would they all collapse? Would all the little small savers have to run out and get their money, like in Greece, standing in front of the machines, just desperately trying to get money? What would happen? And so what was it, 8 out of 90? 16 out of 90? And what do you think? You read those papers, Rupert. Do you think that those figures were accurate? The 1690, the 890, do you think these were true, or were they perhaps made a little nicer than they really were?
Well, it was an English paper. It was iron big. I said they fabricated it, but still, who am I to say?
Well, okay, I mean, it's quite possible that it was in the interest of everybody to find out that the banks were strong.
Yes.
Because if they had come to a result that all of the banks, or the majority, were unable to do this, then
Market exists, finance exists only if we think that it exists. That's something, if we say it's good, it is good. If we think it's bad, it is going to be bad. That's finance.
Okay, but that is perhaps the theory of economics.
Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, cool. So, okay, what's your summary?
Well, my summary would be, well, it's basically coordination, but with control. And when I say this, we all might know even US Treasury is privatized from Soros, and we have money with billionaires having the money who would actually put the situation in days, since they are not doing it, and since the other, with the politicians, with the governments, with the managers who have studied specific field, has to solve it, we have to make sure that we don't be corrupt, which is not possible, because if we see money somewhere bigger than somewhere else, we will go to the bigger side. So right now there is no solution. It's human behavior. If we see good, if we see our profit somewhere else, even though it means it's about moral hierarchy is okay. How much it's also about our nearsightedness or farsightedness, how much far we can see, how much near we can see. So for us, if we don't know what's going to happen, we don't know. If we are farsighted enough, if you know what's going to happen, we alert people.
Yeah.
But then who's going to listen?
Yeah, okay, right. I mean, that's a fairly kind of hopeless way of looking at things.
Yes, it's hopeless, but
Anyway,
with
look,
strong governance.
Right, okay, look, I'm going to stop you there because I just had this wonderful thought. I'm sitting in a room full of mainly non-EU people, including myself, and only Vanessa and I actually belong to the EU here. I still belong to the EU. Oh, you do as well, sorry. Oh, you do as well.
I'm offended.
Well, I you might react then. So, okay, so how do you feel about the way of as a, what does it look like, like from the core of the EU, which is like here, the big spenders, the net spenders like Germany and Great Britain, sort of basically holding up and supporting loads of economies that don't work, like, Bulgaria.
I'm not offended by that.
No, right, exactly. I mean, that's what I expect you not to be, but you should be. So what's your what's your attitude to this? You see the way that, for example, the German finance minister basically dominates the politics of whichever reaction is going to be for the crisis. So, how do you see that? Is that okay? Or do you think, or perhaps you think that, say, like the Greeks, would anyway be kicked out because I mean, that would be difficult for you to say things from your point of view. People paying taxes in Greece or your country must be pretty much the same. What about your pension pages? I don't think this will be a problem anyway.
I'm not very confident about this because I've never paid taxes in Bulgaria anyway. I don't know I don't think the taxes are as big as they're in Germany, in Bulgaria. So I don't know. I cannot speak about this because I don't know. Maybe someone who pays taxes can say, I don't know. Don't ask me.
That's me, I'm going to pay taxes. I'm quite happy to pay taxes.
I used to.
But yeah, you can look at some of us that pay little taxes. Well,
CDF for the TV.
yeah.
Oh yeah, I have problems with them. I owe them a lot of money.
Yeah, we rip off anyway.
It's too bad.
Those aren't even taxes. The taxes are okay. But I mean, so what about this then? I mean, so the EU, is it, I mean, why, his whole discussion is about finding ways for it to work together. And perhaps that's not the point. Perhaps it shouldn't. perhaps a national interest is what everybody wants. They don't want a kind of global or transnational.
Yes. When I heard that, when I read that, it was the suggestion of the paper as well. And the suggestion is right here, actually. It was supposed to be the last way of my discussion question. So as the statement, until the EU has fiscal power which permit each to raise the fund needed to rescue distressed bank, or until there is a system of mandatory burden sharing between member states for fiscal support, supervision will and should remain in the responsibility of member states.
Yeah, but okay, but the EU can only get these fiscal powers if the member states decide to give it.
So basically, they are saying, the paper is saying we should stay separated.
Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. It's a question, this is politics. What is the view from South Korea then?
About this,
About the EU?
about EU.
Yeah. Isn't
Well-
it just a lot of fuss about it?
There is a lot of corruption in Korea as well, so actually, like- but like we kind of admire the system of EU in America because they actually think it's better than how it's operated in Korea. So we never criticize. Like, yeah,
You're nice people.
we're too busy like with the things going on in our country, and we basically admire those well living sustainable countries like America and the EU. So.
Well, I think those adjectives were unusual ones to describe the United States, but sustainable. I don't like. No, it's sustainable. So you just think you reckon that from the point of view of Far East, Southeast Asia or something like that it looks just good.
That's what we think.
It looks good.
I don't think like that, but that's what South Koreans think.
And what about you, Tristan? What about German domination of the EU?
In Poland, like during the crisis, we sustained the economical growth because we still have a different currency, and that's why.
All right, that was considered a good
Yeah,
reason.
the reason why we are skeptical about the Eurozone, and we want some integration with Europe, but not the currency.
I don't think I said that anybody wants total integration. Yeah. But I mean, there must be, I think I'm asking whether you imagine, I'm not asking you, I think what you think is your mathematical, but whether you think that people in Poland are not just distrustful, perhaps they're even, they don't like the fact that, say, in this case, Germany is,
I don't really know. I'm not really into it. Like,
well, I would have thought, I was asking you sort of more rhetorically, because I mean, after this, they're so obviously anti-German, it's like,
yeah, they are.
Yeah. and after they get a lot of votes from Poles, so there must be a lot of Poles who agree with them. Yes,
Probably.
yeah, probably. I would hope not, but it seems that they do
Yeah.
get a lot of agreement, so they get all the biscuits.
But I think they get they vote because of the cultural issues
Yeah.
more than the economical issues.
Yeah, but I'm sure. I mean, okay, what about you, Vanessa? I mean, what have you picked up on your kind of antenna? I mean, don't people think that? Don't a lot of people think that, say, countries like Greece and Ireland, Bulgaria, Romania, they really just they're just dragging us down.
Well, I know a lot of guys who will just drop them and leave them the way they are and won't care about what happens to the people, what happens to their economies, to the markets. They will just leave them and drop them out.
And when you say you hear this or what?
You know, you hear it in the media by many people, and well, we discussed it in school, but we put a different emphasis on it. and most of us said they shouldn't be left because we decided to
Come together.
come together and work together. So we have to go through good times as well as bad times, like crises. So it's kind of like a marriage.
Yeah, all right. Marriage, not the one that he mentioned, the shotgun marriage. You're forced at the point of gun to get married. Yeah, so you're saying that when you were at school, that the general outcome of all these discussions was always a kind of freedom for the Ayakudu kind of thing, because everything's really nice and we'll be nice to each other, etc. I think we all agree that is very nice too, but obviously there are a lot of people who think we don't understand, we don't agree with all kinds of things. They don't agree that it's even a good idea to get together. For Great Britain, they never have agreed. They never actually politically had any interest in the European Union. They only ever politically. I'm not talking about the people who caused Brexit, these idiots in the Conservative Party, that they only ever wanted to have an economic union. Just wanted a big market, 500 million people. Not interested in supporting Ireland or Bulgaria or Southern Italy or whatever, or getting Ukraine in or something like that. So it's a fairly negative history. Well, okay, look,
Actually, I come from Bulgaria, but if you ask me, I think that Bulgaria should leave the union because Bulgaria is only like taking money and doing nothing with it. And a lot of Bulgarians actually think that they should leave, and they're like, "Oh, when it was the communism, we were so well, when everybody had a job." We still have a job. People just don't want to work.
well,
That's Bulgaria, I
you
think.
say Bulgarians just don't want to work.
Yes.
I just don't think this is rubbish.
My mom is like,
But she doesn't want to work. She's lazy.
my mom.
Your mother is obviously different from all other
She's hiring people like she works for this firm and she's hiring people, and people don't want to work because the salary is not big enough. Well,
But can't that be explained?
well,
Or don't you not agree?
but it's not because there's no job.
Yeah, but what you said to me makes absolute sense. They're saying the salary is not big enough. They know how big the salaries are in Germany or in France or in Britain. They're part of the EU. Why should they want to work for something which is not even based on their value in Bulgaria? It's based on their value in the EU.
What should they do? They should leave Bulgaria like,
Well, a lot
All
of
the
people
people-
do, don't they?
yeah,
I mean,
Look at me.
some of you, yeah, exactly, right.
of course. I mean, the salaries in Bulgaria, minimum salary in Bulgaria is 150 euros. That's ridiculous. I wouldn't work for that.
Right, okay, but so
Wait,
why should they work for your mother for 150 euros?
Well,
You say because it's for your mother, that's okay, that's what you say. But I mean,
no,
why
my
should
mom
they-
is not. My mom just works it, but she's just hiring the company from her account.
Okay, fair enough. But I mean, these arguments we hear from everywhere. I mean, for God's sake, they're not just taking money. Bulgaria is not even getting most of the money that it would have a right to because the European Commission stopped sending it because the Bulgarian governments were not investing it as the way they said they should or would.
Well,
So
I know
many of these transfer financing things have been put on ice for years. Because, for example, and this is another one of these problems, this is the kind of thing that in Vanessa's school they probably didn't talk about because it's too dangerous. But for example, the fact that the Bulgarian governments since 1990 have done nothing about the Roma population in Bulgaria because they basically don't want them at all. But that was one of the conditions for entry of Bulgaria and Romania into the EU, that they should tackle this problem socially with money from the EU, with the PAR program. They just didn't do it. And so, quite rightly, the Bulgarian governments, each of them, one after another, have been kind of punished. But it's largely a problem of Bulgarian society and Romanian society that they are unable to cope with this problem. Obviously, they're also unwilling to cope with this problem. Now, this is something which in Germany it doesn't exist, but if it did exist, the Germans probably would cope with it. They would roll up their sleeves and they'd see what can we do about this, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, they would have giant problems too. If they had like Romania, said like about 2 million Roma, with a historical kind of hypothetical sitting there, they would have problems. But the Germans would try to do something. But it's true that Bulgarians, both their governments and the society, have not tried to do anything. So I think, we have problems. I think we have to be a bit more honest about ourselves. I don't think it's true that Bulgaria is just some kind of in parasite, a schmuck concert, or just taking money from the EU. It's part of the EU, it has a right to certain things. But obviously, the EU has a right to tell Bulgarian government, Hungarian government, Polish government to do what they have agreed to do, which is, for example, what the Polish government is refusing to do. The Polish government is breaking all of the rules. The Hungarian government is breaking all the rules. But at the same time, a government like Greece is following all the rules that are dictated to it by the European Commission. So, it's a question of political injustice. So I think it's a problem. I think we have a very troubled relationship to ourselves, and I think we have to be a bit more honest. But from the Russian point of view, it's
Well, depends what you mean by Russian point of view. I guess I'm not agree. Yeah, well, people are also, it's hard to know what people are thinking when Russia's so big. And yeah, and now it starts to hard to speak with some people. For example, when you understand people are directly for Putin and I don't know, against Germany, against the US, and saying the whole world is stupid. Well, there is no conversation that can happen. And I experience that more and more. So just like nope, I don't know this person. Because of all the media propaganda and so on. So a lot of people are just hypnotized by this propaganda and think that the whole world is a fine, is an enemy.
But it's not just propaganda. So I mean, people actually they live in that country, and they actually have to cope daily with the problems of that country. And some people have got quite big problems. I mean, economically, or you think they don't? I think they do.
Yeah.
I think they do. And so I mean, they perhaps like the people who voted for Trump in the Midwest and some ex-industrial centers, but they think he's really brilliant for all kinds of reasons. Is it just propaganda? Are they just been brainwashed? No, they're trying to make sense of their rotten existence. Right? Just like that on journal. So we find that everywhere. I think it's not good enough to just put things down to sort of people not just manipulating. People actually make decisions, even if they're wrong or horrible or frightening. They actually do things themselves. They're not just all being manipulated by Trumps and the Putins. I mean, Putin is not in a position to manipulate millions of people. And the PiS government in Poland is not in a position to manipulate millions of Poles. They actually think what they think. And the government expresses what they think they think. Because before they thought it still. Now they've got a government which actually expresses it, which is a horrible thing about it, but it's real. That's the great, so far, the great comfort of Germany. The Germans always go to the edge and then they step back because they're much too comfortable to risk. Yeah. Okay, right. We're obviously finishing, but before we let Rubens go, we have to say, your talk, his talk, was obviously a good example of, first of all, okay, I hope that you all remember that for the exam there is a limit of 10 slides, right? Not 61 or 77,000, so 10 slides, right? Yeah.
I can actually give 10 slides right
I
now.
know, yeah, but I mean, that's not even. I allow people. I think I suggested you can pop up something instead of clicking back, but you can't turn 10 slides into 700. I mean, that's not legitimate. So you've got to have it's got to also look like 10 slides, right?
Okay.
Second point is, obviously, what we noticed is if you don't actually know where you are in the talk. For example, am I now at 0.3 and 5 or something like that? Then basically the audience, and this is you should recognize this, the audience gives up hope. They basically they just kind of say they can become kind of apathetic and say, oh my God, this is never going to be finished. You've got to let the people know at the beginning where you're going to take them, and you've got to in some way let them know where they are. halfway through the end. Otherwise, they can't even, they couldn't follow that talk anyway because it was just too much. But they've got to know where they are. Is it going to be over soon? Right. Exactly. So, I mean, that's for all of us. 10 slides, obviously some kind of structure. That doesn't mean you have to always have, like, the little number at the top saying this is 1 or 2. But you will have a handout anyway. And your handout must reflect in mirror accuracy what you're doing. It must not be different to your talk. Otherwise, everybody's sitting here looking at the handout and looking at the talk and saying, where the bloody hell am I? They've got to know where they are with both. That would be a great help. Apart from that, the rest is just right. So, those are important things. Right? Okay? Wait. Right, okay, so if you've got any questions, you can ask them, but I'm going to talk to you. And as I said, honestly, I'll never get to hear that. Or